Have you ever stopped to think about how you breathe when you're asleep? What if I told you that simple act could be one of the most important things you do to protect your brain from diseases like Alzheimer's? Today, we're going to dive into this incredible connection between our breath, our sleep, and the long-term health of our brain. And it really all boils down to this one kind of mind-blowing question. Could a simple breathing machine be one of our best weapons in a fight against cognitive decline? To figure that out, we've got to start with what's happening inside our heads every single night. So to understand how a breathing machine could have such a massive impact, we first need to talk about a fundamental job the brain has: taking out the trash. I want you to think of your brain as this huge, bustling city. It is working around the clock 24/7, creating all our thoughts, our memories, our actions. But just like any city, it produces waste. In the brain's case, this waste comes in the form of toxic proteins, like something called amyloid beta. Now, normally, the brain has this brilliant system for cleaning all that gunk out, but in Alzheimer's disease, that system just breaks down. The trash starts piling up, and that leads to some really devastating consequences. The hero of this whole story is a system that scientists, believe it or not, only recently discovered. It's called the glymphatic system, and you can think of it as the brain's dedicated cleanup crew. Its entire job, its whole purpose, is to flush out all those byproducts before they can build up and cause damage. But here's the really crucial part. It's all about the timing. A great way to think about it is like a dishwasher for your brain. It doesn't run during the day, when the kitchen is busy. It saves its most powerful deep clean cycle for when you're in, you guessed it, deep sleep. The takeaway here is super simple. No deep sleep, no deep clean, period. And that, of course, brings us to the villain of our story, a surprisingly common problem that throws a massive wrench into this whole nightly cleaning process. It's called obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA. And look, this is way more than just loud snoring. This is a condition where a person's airway literally closes off and they stop breathing. And every single time this happens, your brain hits the panic button. It has to jolt you up into a lighter stage of sleep just so you can take a breath. This can happen over and over and over all night, completely shattering the quality of your sleep. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but that's got to be a rare thing, right? Well, no. This is where the connection becomes impossible to ignore. In patients who have Alzheimer's, the prevalence of OSA is as high as 91%. Just let that sink in for a second. This is not some minor link. It's a huge, flashing red flag. So here's the bottom line. By constantly yanking the brain out of that precious deep sleep, OSA is basically preventing that glymphatic dishwasher from ever running its full cycle. The toxic proteins just don't get cleared out. They're left to build up night after night after night. Which leads us to a really logical but incredibly important question. If OSA is preventing the brain's cleanup crew from doing its job, what happens if we fix the OSA? Could treating it actually help? Well, that is exactly what a recent pilot study set out to discover. So the researchers found 21 people who were at this really critical point in their lives. They were all starting to show the early signs of cognitive decline, and every single one of them also suffered from sleep apnea. They were the perfect group to test this theory on. The plan was pretty simple, but it was powerful. First, they tested everyone's cognitive function to get a starting point. Then, for 1 full year, one group used a CPAP machine every night to treat their sleep apnea, while the other group didn't. At the end of that year, they brought everyone back in and tested them again to see what, if anything, had changed. So you ended up with 2 distinct groups: 12 people who had more severe sleep apnea and who consistently used the CPAP machine, and then 9 people who were in the non-user group, either because their case was milder to begin with, or they just couldn't get comfortable with the device. So, the big question. After a full year, what was the difference? Did treating their breathing actually do anything to protect their brains? Well, the results? They were pretty stunning. Okay, this chart says it all. Seriously, look at the bar on the left, the darker blue one. That's the group that did not use the CPAP. Their cognitive scores dropped by almost 4 points. That is a really significant decline. But now, look at the bar on the right, the CPAP users. Their scores barely budged. They declined by only about half a point. I mean, the difference is just staggering. It really looks like treating their sleep apnea dramatically slowed down the progression of their cognitive decline. And you don't have to take my word for it. The researchers' own conclusion says it all. They found that CPAP use was associated with, and this is their term, attenuated cognitive decline, and that it could preserve certain cognitive functions. In other words, by fixing the sleep problem, they were literally building a shield for the brain. And a study found it wasn't just about the machine. It was about the kind of sleep it allowed them to have. More deep sleep was protective, obviously, but here's where it gets really wild. They even found that sleep position mattered. People who spent more time sleeping on their right side actually had better outcomes, while sleeping on your back was linked to worse cognitive health. It just goes to show how many different factors are at play here. Okay, so let's zoom out. What does this all mean for us? What are the big takeaways from this really powerful little study? Well, the biggest one is that treating sleep apnea could be a seriously important tool for protecting the brain. This isn't just about snoring anymore. We also learned that the very architecture of our sleep, how much deep sleep we get, even our body position, has a direct impact on our brain. Now, of course, it's so important to remember, this was a small pilot study. We definitely need larger trials to confirm these results. But wow, what an incredibly promising start. And it really leaves us with this one profound final thought. You know, in our search for all these complex, high-tech cures, what if one of our most powerful preventative tools has been with us all along, just waiting for us each night when we turn out the lights? Could a good night's sleep be the ultimate brain shield?